Good backstories have holes, blank spaces in them for the other players, including the Dungeon Master, to start writing their parts of the story so that we can come together and weave this kind of emergent, coherent narrative into a story. The best backstories create more questions than they answer. For a lot of players, Dungeons & Dragons is a beer and pretzels experience. We sign up to have some fun with some friends, to show up Friday night, eat some chips, drink some soda, kill some orcs, explore some dungeons, get some loot, and do it all over again next Friday night. We did not sign up to be writers. Cool, we can do both. As a dungeon master, I will spend my time creating interesting dungeons for you to go into, cool monsters for you to fight and feel good about defeating, and weird treasure for you to find interesting ways for you to use it. And while I enjoy doing that, it does take time and effort for me to do that. At least a couple of you can put some time and effort into developing a couple sentences that will help kickstart my creative brain. I also get the desire to sit down and write a short story about your character. Everything that your character experienced in their heroic life up to this point, everything that they're going to do, and everything they're going to be. Many of our players are steeped in fantasy and science fiction. They watch anime or read manga, television, movies, novels, whatever it is. This stuff is in their bones. And now is their opportunity to go and be that character that they've always dreamt of playing, or the character that's their favorite from whatever the media is that they like to consume. If you want to go write a novel about your character, please, by all means, do so. I could use more books to read. But you don't want to play through my novel, and I don't want to narrate yours. At best, these are two alternate versions of the character, alternate timelines, if you will. The one that you wrote in the book and the one at the gaming table. But it can be limiting if you always have it in the back of your head that this isn't the true story of what happened to my character. That's what I wrote, not what's happening at the gaming table. And that can limit your involvement and your emotional investment in what's happening at the table in this emergent storytelling, hamstring it for the entire table. The Player's Handbook gives us traits, bonds, and flaws, and some of them are pretty decent for backstories. There's one in the Player's Handbook about, my family is missing and I have no idea where they are. I hope to see them one day again. That's a great backstory. I can definitely work with that, and I immediately have a lot of questions and a lot of possible answers. But there's other ones in there like, I wish my childhood sweetheart had come with me to fulfill my destiny. It's not really a backstory. I could make it work, but really it's more of a regret, and it's not really a motivation to go slay dragons. So what would a good backstory look like? Instead of thinking of it as a short story, think of it as like the blurb on the front cover. You're trying to get the other players and the dungeon masters to pick up, engage, expand, and explore your backstory. The stories of heroics and adventures always seemed out of reach to me until I came into possession of a mysterious object. Dark figures have come seeking it, and I must find out why. Is that Lord of the Rings, and the object is the ring, and the dark figures are the Nazgul? Or is it Star Wars, and the mysterious object is R2-D2, and the dark figures are actually dressed in white, and they're stormtroopers? Or is it Treasure Island, and the mysterious object is the treasure map, and the dark figures are the pirates and Long John Silver? You don't know, because that hasn't been decided yet. You just have a bunch of questions about what's going on, and it's going to emerge through the storytelling of the campaign who you actually are and what these secrets mean. It can be tempting to write our characters larger than life. Once I was a great general. I served the emperor and I slew the dragon lord Yoshino at the Battle of Dunhain. Now I live in exile, plotting my rise and my master's return to power. Is that level appropriate? Maybe if you're starting Eva Vecna, but if you're doing Waterdeep Dragon Heist, no, there's no way that character is level 1. And as a dungeon master, if I wanted to use that, I'm very locked into a few details. There's definitely a place called Dunhain. You definitely were on one side of this conflict, whatever it was, serving the emperor, and I don't even know who that is yet. And there's a person called Lord Yoshino, has something to do with dragons, and is definitely dead. So if I want to bring that person back, they're already a corpse. I know what's happened to these people already. You've kind of locked me into some things and removed some of the freedom that I have to narrate this campaign. Okay, but if you did want to use that, how would you turn that into a usable backstory? I've lived as a farmer for the past 20 years, but once I was something more. I was at a famous battle, and what I did there changed the course of world events. As a dungeon master, I have lots of questions, and I'm eager to find out the answers. Why are you here? Are you in hiding? Are you retired? What's going to take you out of hiding or retirement? Did you do something good or bad? Which side of this battle were you on? Is maybe that why you're in hiding? Is because whoever you served, ultimately you've had a change of heart and found out that they were not a good master and now you're ashamed of what you did? Did you do something that changed course of world events in a good or a bad way? What happened here? I have lots of things that I can attach to in there and create a campaign from. My players ask for help coming with a backstory. I tell them I only need the answer to one question. What is the thing that happened in your life that they believe that taking up a career in the low life expectancy field of dragon slaying, lich killing, dungeon delving is the best option they have? I like to give concrete examples, so I asked my players if I could share their backstories and how things unfolded since we started the campaign. And they said yes. We're only going to use 2 because, well, time. The first character's name is Zin. That player wanted to play a human monk, and that's not a thing in my world, so I said, yes, you can play that, but they cannot be from a dojo or a monastery. This has to be like the lone trainer out in the wilderness that taught you how to fight, that kind of a story arc. And he came back with this backstory. My master knew that in this dangerous world, I would need to fight to survive, so he trained me the only way he knew how. A year ago, we parted ways, but we were supposed to meet again in this town, but it's been a week, and he hasn't shown up. The next character is Sabine, and that player wants a human warlock with a familiar name, Quijibo.
Quijibo. A big, dumb, balding North American ape with no chin. And a short temper.
And they're going to worship elemental spirits. Think of like the Shinto religion from Japan and the kami spirits, that kind of thing. And they came to me with this backstory. I lived with my tribe out in the desert until I was a young teenager. Something attacked my village and destroyed my entire tribe, and I don't know why. I'm the only survivor, and to continue, I've done unscrupulous things. I asked the elemental spirits of the desert for power to find out who destroyed my tribe so I can have my vengeance. Early in the adventure, Zin encounters a priest that keeps the records for the towns, and he asks that priest if he has any records of people being able to do the things that Zin can do. Tap into chi. The priest says, I've heard of people that can do that, but it's only ever the Vog. They come from ships, and then they travel around for a few years before they return back to their ships and wherever they came from. Zin asks the priest to describe a Vog, and it matches up with his master, who now has a name, Red Bear. They go on a couple adventures, and at 4th level, they're in the catacombs underneath a dwarven city, where they encounter a blue dragon. And there's a lot that goes on there, and that story's longer than I'm going to make it, but, time. At the end of it, they defeat the blue dragon, and Sabine's player asked me, hey, since I had a hard time in that fight, could I, hate blue dragons? Could that be part of my story? And I said, absolutely. So the next session opens with Sabine waking up from a dream. You crawl out from under the bodies of your parents who had shielded you from the blast, and as you look out towards the horizon, the last light of the setting sun glints off turquoise wings, azure scales, and a serpentine tail. As a dungeon master, I'm trying to be non-committal at this point. I know the dragons are involved because that's what the player wants, but I don't know if they're strictly speaking what killed her family, and I don't know what their reasoning was yet. I did decide at this point that their patron has something to do with why the dragons were there, and that means that Quijibo has something to do with why the dragons were there. Meanwhile, Zin in the Dwarven Citadel tries to train some dwarves to be monks, but he can't. For some reason, he can't allow them to unlock their chi. He can train them to be very fine martial artists. They're fighters with an unarmed style, but they are not monks. They lack the supernatural powers that Dungeons & Dragons gives them, and he doesn't know why. Inside the city, they also find out that people have seen other humans with monk-like powers to the south, so the party decides that they're going to go down to the south. Through a series of events, they have to go talk to a bronze dragon named Afekabor. This guy. They decide to nickname him Affy, just to irritate me, but okay. Sabine is hostile to Affy and doesn't like him, and I decide that Quijibo wants desperately to get away from Afekabor at all possible costs, so he tries to run and convince Sabine to do the same thing. Affy tells Sabine,
"You would do well to get rid of that evil thing. It is not what it seems."
At this point, the player Sabine just kind of says flat out, Sabine is an evil player character. We're just going with that. And I'm okay with having evil player characters in my campaign. It doesn't fit with the lore of my world that the kami would have granted their power to this character for a mission of vengeance. So somebody else must have given their power and is pretending to be an elemental spirit. And I settled on the Queens of the Sands. I don't know what that is yet. I just came up with a name for them. I'll figure it out later. The party does find other human monks, but they find out that they're in league with devils. The Empress, the other nobles have failed to stop the civil war and gain peace, so the monks are going to do it at all costs, and they need power to do that. Power that the devils are willing to offer them. So they took the deal, and they've now become devil-worshipping monks. The players do eventually defeat them, but it is now even more important to Zin that he goes and finds Red Bear, because Red Bear had to have been involved in the creation of these monks. The party travels east, and they do eventually find Red Bear, and Red Bear admits that he was involved in creating this devil-worshipping cult of monks. He had looked around this war-torn world and seen violence, poverty, famine, disease, and decided any order must be better than this, and he summoned the devils and made his pact, only to find out that they, of course, had wormed out of it and gotten the better of him. And now he's ashamed, because not only did I unleash this evil on the world, I also betrayed my people's most important secret, how they unlock chi. Red Bear dies, and as he's dying, he tells Zin that he can find the secrets to how he made these monks up in a cave in the mountains. Please undo my mistake. Party does go into the caves, and there's something that happens there that's too complicated to explain because I don't have the time. But ultimately, the result is that the rest of the party doesn't trust Sabine anymore. At the end of the caves, they come to a room that is covered in cave paintings like those in France. The paintings are magical and they contain the souls of the monks from Doishu. In the room is a hag with a giant jar, and she's sucking the souls out of this painting. She turns, sees the party, and calls Sabine sister. Come and help me. And Quijibo, trying to seize on this rift, tries to encourage Sabine to join the hag. Sabine decides ultimately, these are my only friends, and she kills Quijibo. Expecting that she's out of magic, she's going to be cut off from her source, she is surprised to find she still has her magic. And whenever she uses it, strange things start to happen. Her hair goes white, her skin bleaches gray, her eyes go red, and she starts aging prematurely. Every time she stops using it, it all reverts back to her normal form. They go back to town, and Sabine is desperate for answers, so she goes to the Temple of Knowledge, and the Goddess of Knowledge helps her out. Sabine finds out that it was Sabine that killed her entire family. Sabine's parents lost their original child, and Sabine was left on their doorstep as a foundling. They raised her as their own, and they did come to love her. On her 13th birthday, she undertook a metamorphosis into a night hag. She is a hagborn, and as this extraplanar being was forming into existence, she was draining life from everyone else around her to power that transformation. And the dragons were coming in to wipe out that threat. But her parents, who did love her, called out to the patron spirit of their tribe, and that patron granted their wish and locked her transformation so that Sabine could not become a full night hag. She would stay the daughter that they loved. Sabine, every time she is tapping into her power, is now tapping into her latent hag powers. She is tapping into the powers of the plane of Hades. And if she continues to do so, she can, but she will eventually become a night hag. Maybe you don't care about backstories. That's fine. Maybe you want your character's story to develop entirely within the game. I get that. It can be a lot of fun to play the fighter that is really just here for the glory of dragon slaying. Not everyone has to care about their backstory at the table. Maybe you find that your Dungeon Master doesn't care about backstories. That doesn't necessarily make them a bad DM. It's a style of gameplay that is usually around kind of sandbox campaigns. Playing published adventures like Out of the Abyss, Curse of Strahd, or Descent into Avernus, it can be a little hard to work backstories in there because you were taken from wherever you were and you're now somewhere else, whether that's in a prison in the Underdark or in a shadow plane. You could work backstories in there, but you're asking the Dungeon Master to do a lot of hoops to try to do it, and that's not really what those campaigns are about. But the Dungeon Master is asking for this stuff. They want your backstory, and you give them a short story that explains everything about your character. The Dungeon Master didn't sign up to narrate through your novel. They signed up to create a story together with you. The Dungeon Master is a player too. Let them have some fun.